I'm not gonna say.
Yeah, we didn't do much on it. I remember, yeah. So it was,
Then there'll be the school committee roll call. The reason being is so that this will be an open meeting. We're gonna give Mayor McGee a few more minutes. Hopefully he's on his way. So as I said a few minutes ago, that there'll be two roll calls. There'll be the city council roll call and then the school committee roll call. Chairman of the school committee is obviously the mayor. He's sitting up here. And we're going to open the meeting. Roll call.
Counsel Barton? Present. Counsel Chakutis? Present. Counsel Calucci? Present. Counsel Field? Present. Counsel Hogan?
Present.
Present. Counsel LaPierre? Present. Counsel Lozey? Absent. Counsel Net? Present. Counsel Staubed? Present. Counsel Walsh? Present. Counsel Seer?
Present. Mary.
Present.
I'll rise for a moment of silence. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first of all, I want to thank the school committee for coming tonight and joining with us. I also want to thank the mayor for being here tonight, Mike Donovan, Chief Archer, Chief Desmarais, Mike Patino, attorneys Myhos, Markopoulos, and Lamanna. The reason why we're having this special meeting tonight is I watched the Buildings and Property Committee at the school committee and talking about Marshall Middle School. And I could tell that a lot of the members that spoke, basically everybody on the school committee, spoke at one time or at one point or another. And I felt as though they needed more information as to Marshall Middle School and what's been going on there for the last several years, which has been a lot. Aside from, in the last year and a half, over 60 fire and police calls to that location, as well as drug overdoses, prostitution taking place, breaking and entering, kids getting in there, destroying the building. One day, a few months back, there were several fires that were started at the same time in the building. I believe it got into as high as a 3-alarm fire. The building is definitely a safety issue, not only to the firefighters and the police. When police respond to a call there, most times they can't go into the building because you need to have a hazmat suit. They don't carry those in the cruises. I can tell you that I received myself numerous calls from all the houses that surround that property, from people telling me that they're witnessing prostitution acts taking place in the back, that homeless people have taken up residence on the property. We just can't maintain it. And it was mentioned to me by one or two school committee members that the school department or the school committee voted to tear the building down. Well, when they first were looking at tearing the building down, the estimated cost was around $2 to $3 million. Nobody realized the amount of asbestos that was in the building. Today it would cost roughly $9.5 million to tear the building down and secure it. We don't have the money to tear the building down. That's why it hasn't been torn down. We are constantly spending our budget money, as well as not only after we give the school committee their budget from the city side, we're still paying off English, classical, Marshall, that comes out of the city side. We maintain the parks. Anytime a school committee comes to the city council or the school department and asks us for money to finance a project, we always give them money. We know that you have a really tough job. We're the third or fourth largest school district in the state. We have 27 buildings. 12 of them are over 100 years old. We all know that. We need to build new schools. As School Committee Woman Capola and John Hogan have said, land is at a premium in Lynn. It really is, and we need to find land to build on. This is not a great location for a school. The neighborhood is so densely populated. It's got one-way street on one side of it, which is Porter Street, and the other street, Jackson Street, probably should be a one-way. It's surrounded by multifamily homes. This neighborhood cannot support that. And I don't mean this to be disrespectful to anybody in the room when I say this. None of us are experts on where a school should go. We found that out a few years ago when we were talking about building a new middle school. What we should really do is create a committee, bring in an outside source, and take a look and have an outside company actually tell us where we should be building schools. I know that Councilor Capola suggested that maybe we could take and use part of the land to build a learning facility. You have 3 schools that are all within a block of that school: Ingalls, Marshall, and Avon. And Ingalls has 3 times the amount of land on it that if we were looking for a piece of land to build a learning center, that could possibly be the spot. But as a ward councilor and someone who's been dealing with this, and I've had numerous neighborhood meetings there with Councilor Barton, the neighborhood is so frustrated and so afraid with that building being there because of what's been taking place the last several years. And we've asked the school committee to turn that property back over to the city. We've been approached by different developers, some of the developers who responded to the RFP that we did a few years back, to see if the land would still be available, and they're still interested in purchasing that property. The reason why they weren't able to do it was the stipulations that were put in place when we put the RFP out a few years ago. It takes time. The people that are going to develop this property, this is what they do. And the building itself, even though it has as much asbestos inside of it, can still be rehabbed. And the people that are looking to do it need to get what they call tax credits. They have to go to the federal government, and that takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to do that. They also have to get vouchers that stay with the building. That takes time to secure those vouchers. Then they go to the bank, and they ask the bank, and they show them all the different things that they have so that they can get money to support the project that they want to do there. Now, if we were to send the RFP out and somebody responded and wanted to buy that, they would take over the property immediately, and it would relieve the city of Lynn of the liability. My biggest fear is having to knock on a firefighter's door and tell his family he's not coming home because of that building and the condition of it. I don't know how many people have been in that building. I've been in it several times. And it's a maze. And there's not a lot of electricity that's in there. You could get lost in there very easily. And I know Councilor Barton's sitting there, and I can tell you 2 occasions, and one of them was my brother-in-law who got lost inside of a building and couldn't find his way out during a fire. And he got stuck down in the basement, and they had to go in and find him, and they actually did. So I do know what it's like to worry about firefighters. The police are going there constantly because there are people in the back that are shooting up and doing drugs because they feel as though it's a secluded place to be able to do those things. If anybody has any questions for me, and I'm going to ask Mike Patino to come up in a minute, and Mike Donovan, but if anybody has any questions or would like to speak or say anything, I'm going to ask you to come to the podium and to remove your mask. We are being televised. It is on TV. This is an extremely important issue that the city is faced with. We don't have $10 million to tear that building down. We just don't have it. We have other places we need to be spending the money. Building new schools is one. And the school committee would be getting in the school department, any money that we get from this could go towards the building of a new school, go towards the study of where to put that new school. I mean, to be honest with you, what we would have to do in order to make this a workable site to build a school on, but it doesn't even make sense to put a park there, but you would be talking about the taking of homes. This neighborhood is so densely populated that if you drive down Jackson Street, you see a row of houses that back up to Marshall Middle School. But if you look behind those houses, there are other houses behind there with common driveways to get to the back of those houses. A lot of these houses people have lived in for 40, 50, 60 years. I know these families. They're frustrated. As the ward councilor, I'm frustrated that we haven't been able to do what we should have done with this building. I don't know if the mayor wants to add anything or say anything, but I'm going to ask Mike Patino to come to the podium. Mike is the CFO. He's the guy that oversees our budget. He's the one who tells us where we should spend money, where we shouldn't spend money. Mike?
Thank you, Council President. Mike Bertino, CFO. I believe I know just about everybody in the room. Again, Council President said it's my job to advise the city on all financial matters. And I just remind everybody, we're just 2.5 fiscal years removed from borrowing the $14 million. And although things are better today, we have a lot of choices in front of us. And as we prepare for the 2022 budget, we're looking at our capital improvement program, and we're looking at expenditures ahead of us. And we're trying to make the best use of the money that we have. And so when I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at all the different items we have on our capital improvement list, I see this big liability, and the liability is the old school. And it's a liability because it's an uninsurable piece of property that's deemed hazardous, that we've spent countless hours with public safety responding to calls, fixing boarded up windows, all of which comes out of the school side of the maintenance budget because it's still in the custody of the school. So when I'm looking at that and I see this giant liability there, I have to ask, what we either have to take our money, which we have a few dollars, from being, relatively wise over the last few years and working together as a group. Where is the best $3 or $4 million that we have right now to be spent? Is it worth spending on, improving our existing schools, putting money towards new school projects, one of which everybody knows that we encountered? So the next time we go for a school, we have to put up our own money without reimbursement because we already got reimbursed for a study that never came to fruition. So when it comes to the matter of making a recommendation to the mayor and the council, I have to think about this $3.5 to $5 million additional money we need to remove this liability from the books. And it's really hard as a financial professional to recommend spending it on something else when we don't have a plan. We can't see the light at the end of the tunnel for this building. We tried once together and were unsuccessful at an RFP. We need to try again. But you have to remove the restrictions. Investors are going to come in and look at it and say, well, what do I got to do to make this my building? Everything's changed. No one could have predicted how much asbestos was in this building. When we do work compared to the private sector, we pay a premium because we have a lot more laws that we have to follow. So I would much rather put the money towards creating a new asset than keeping up this old asset that's a tremendous liability to us. Again, I say this knowing that someone's going to make us tear that down in a year or two. It's unfair to ourselves as residents or residents of the city. It's unfair to the constituents, to the mayor, and to the council, as well as the school committee. We have to move forward beyond this, and hopefully we can do the right thing with this building and start using that pocket of money that we had to creating new assets, and those assets would be hopefully in the form of schools. And that's my position. And I unfortunately, I wish I had 50 million that I could spend. Then we could flatten the building, take it out. But I think at this day and age, it's not the right move for the city to spend any more money than necessary on that building and hopefully move forward in a different direction with the remaining funds that we do have.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Megan. I'm going to ask Mike Donovan, I didn't talk to him before the meeting, but I'm going to ask him just to come because he's been basically kind of overseeing this property and the condition of it. If you could, Mike, if you would just tell the...
Good afternoon. The school is in horrible shape would be the best way to put it. The last use of the school was in April of 2016. At that time, all school uses were removed except for storage. There hasn't been an occupancy in the building. When the building was put into a non-occupied status, obviously we dropped the heat down. We're not going to heat an empty building, a building that's very, very expensive to heat. So the finishes in the building are deteriorating. The flooring in the building has deteriorated over the years, and because of leaks in the roof is in very bad condition. We've got issues with the wall finishes because of the roof leaks. The building, when it was closed, was deemed to be the second worst school building in the Commonwealth by the MSBA. So we're not starting with a facility that was just outdated and not up to date and needed to be improved for education. We started with the facility that was the second worst in the Commonwealth. Right now, we have a project going on where we're abating both the 63 and the 1923 building of materials that can be seen. The original study that was done to determine the $3.5 million demolition did not do destructive testing. What we found out when we decided to do destructive testing after the school was vacated was that underneath all the flooring on 3 of the 4 floors, there's a leveling course that's cementous and nature containing asbestos, that the exterior walls and the exterior walls below grade are coated in a waterproofing material that contains asbestos, that the glue holding the ceiling tiles up on the 3rd floor contains asbestos, and the asbestos on the floors was placed in a manner that it's structurally unsafe to shore the building up. You'd have to shore the building up and take the asbestos out because the structural engineers have determined that to do so because the walls were built in the interior columns and parts of the interior walls. They're not load-bearing walls, but they were built on top of the floors. So we have to go under floors and under the exterior walls to get the asbestos out. So what that means is that today we're abating the 1923 building with everything that you can see and touch, which would include the ceiling tiles that we can take down in the glue, and any asbestos plasters that we can access the floor tiles. But what we're not doing is demolishing the floors themselves to get to this material. The building's going to be left in a state as part of this project where police and fire and any city employees that need to can access the building and go into it. The corridor leading to the 1963 building and the 1963 building itself will be demolished in the next coming month or so. So we'll be left with the original 23 building on the site with the cost of anywhere between $4 and $6 million, depending on the market at the time, because all the material, including the foundations, will be taken out as what they call hot, because the waterproofing is still going to be attached to it. And it'd be more expensive I'm told, to try to remove the waterproofing from the foundation and then ship the concrete off separately with that material. So it just will all be taken out and hauled out of state and disposed either in New Hampshire or Ohio. So it's very expensive because of the per ton cost for disposal. Now, having said that, we're going to be left with the building that was built in 1923. There's no power in it. The roof leaks. The windows will be boarded up, so access will be more difficult. I am probably going to be expending some more funds, if I can find them, to block up the windows on the grade in the first floor so that somebody will literally need a 40-foot ladder to get into the building through the second floor so that you can't smash your way in, because that's what's been going on, is they'll just smash right through what barriers we put up. And the building will deteriorate day after day after day unless we go spend a few $100,000 to fix the roof, which is just, good money after bad in my mind. So every day that goes by, every weather event that happens, that building will be in worse condition for the city, and the price to dispose of it will go up. So that's the situation we're in right now with that building. It'll be made safe, but it will not be made any better than it is right at this moment today. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to ask Chief Archer if he'd come up and talk about the day that, and I think you only would have to talk about this one particular day, that there were several fires that were started inside the building all at the same time. And you can add to it or whatever you want to.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, you were talking about the fire that we had, I believe it was back in the end of October, where vandals had set a number of fires. There were 3 or 4 different spot fires that they had set inside the building. That kind of thing has happened a number of times. My records show at least 23 incidents we've had of some sort of fire or alarm activation in the building since the building's been vacant. And a number of those have been actual fires that vandals set in the building. So from a fire department perspective, obviously the building's a big concern to us. Anytime you've got a building that's vacant like that, has been vacant that long, it's a target for vandals. It's absolutely irresistible to vandals. They are going to find their way inside of the building. They are going to set these kind of fires in there. And, a lot of people think because it's a vacant building, it's not as much of a fire concern. But there is still some storage in the building. And also, once you get the walls going, or those old wooden floors, thick, full-dimensional lumber, once that stuff starts to burn, you're going to have some tremendous fire load inside the building. So the building itself becomes your fire load. And as your council president indicated, finding your way around inside a building like that, when your firefighters now got to go and find their way around inside a building, that becomes a concern. The windows are boarded up, so now we don't have that easy second egress should things go bad. So all those kind of things are a concern, as well as the asbestos. Anytime we go anywhere inside that building, our guys have to go in there on air. We're going in there on air because we just have to assume the entire building is asbestos, is asbestos hazardous building. So that's how we have to treat it. So obviously that slows down our operations and how we do everything. So the building's just a concern from a fire department perspective. I'm glad to see that it is boarded up to make the access to it a little more difficult for the vandals, so that's a good thing. But they do tend to find their way in there, and when they do, they just make mischief, which makes things difficult for us. So the sooner we can do something with the building, the sooner that something can be done with the building, the better from our perspective, because we know we're just going to continue to have problems with it as long as it sits there vacant. That's just the reality of it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Megan's running out of towels, I think. I'm going to ask Chief Desmarais to come up and just give a little bit of heads up as to what they've been faced with there.
Council President,
Chief.
since January 1st of 2019, we responded there 60 times. Since June of 2019, when we received notice from ISD that it was unsafe to go inside without respirators due to asbestos. We haven't had any interior responses. But we still go to the property quite a bit for activity happening outside, suspicious activity, drug activity, people on the property, youth running around. My concern is that the longer it goes on like this, that the officers are going to get called there some night, and they're going to hear somebody inside who needs help, and they're going to disregard their own safety, and they're going to go into the building to see what's going on. You know, they don't have respirators. And if they think there's an emergency inside the building and someone's in distress, they're going to disregard the notice not to go in the building, and they're going to. They're going to endanger themselves. So, like I said, the problems inside, we haven't had those in a year and a half, but we're still responding there quite a bit on the outside.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to ask that somebody make a motion to go into executive session for a few minutes, because I have a question that I don't know if I should ask. It's kind of like a liability question.
Motion to go into executive session.
Motion made, seconded, roll call.
Counsel Barton? Yes. Counsel Chakutis? Yes. Counsel Calucci?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Field? Yes. Counsel Hogan?
Yes.
Yes. Counsel LaPierre? Yes. Counsel Lozey? Absent. Counsel Net? Yes. Counsel Staben? Yes. Counsel Walsh? Yes. Counsel Seer?
Yes, I'm going to also ask roll call of the school committee members. Can, Attorney Lamanna, can we shut the mics off? Session.
as two bodies that really need to come up with a solution, because it's not just on our side as far as the school situation goes, but we know that there is no land here in the city, and yet, as you said, 12 of our schools are over 100 years old. You know, we know that Avon has no land to rebuild on that property. Tracy is the same kind of a situation. So we're in a bind. So it's the only piece of property that we know of that we could possibly use for school. And so we're not trying to be disrespectful to the police or the fire department as far as that goes. We're elected for the children, and we know that we are in dire need of space, not only space, but in bringing our schools up to par to what they should be. You know, they've been many, many years neglected, and we haven't been able to. And it was an unfortunate thing that the vote didn't go through, you know, for the Pickering and for an additional middle school. Nothing's changed since then. We still need it. You know, I think that the two bodies together need to kind of come up with a plan of, okay, if this is the right thing to do, is to turn it over, what do you what can you meet with us on to show us that where our need is, that we could have it? I mean, we've talked about for years and years and years about an early childhood centers, east, west, to try to relieve classroom space that are in our buildings. And, you know, it was just thrown out as an idea. I mean, today, before I left today, I had, you know, people calling with concerns because we have kids going in the buildings this week and taking tests. They have to take an access test. It has to be done. You know, we don't have the ventilation fixed yet in buildings. So it's a concern to those people. I have a letter that came today to me, you know, talking that, you know, you're on track. This is somebody, you know, who's been around for a long, long time and was talking about, you know, you have Avon that needs to be replaced. You have Brickett that's very, very old. You know, is this something that could be looked at? So, you know, this is what we have, and we don't have an answer to where we're going to put them. You know, we've talked about it, and we've spent a lot of money. That's been explained. We've spent lots and lots of money for studies. Studies are very, very expensive. And you're right, but I think this is a starting point, that if you can work with us and help us find alternative spots,
Yep.
you know, we can be open to that. So we do appreciate it. It's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, school committee woman. I just want to say something real quick, that I totally agree with everything that school committee woman Capola is saying, and we do got to work better collectively, better than we have in the past. I do see that there is a big issue, as I said earlier when I started talking about land, how there is none in Lynn. But the truth of the matter is, it always becomes a political football when we start talking about the location where we want to put a school. And that's why we got to get an outside source to come in, and I believe we can do that. We can create a committee of 2 school committee members and 2 counselors to work with both Attorney Myhos and Lamanna and Markopoulos, and put together a plan where we bring someone to come in that does this for a living and can look at what's feasible and what makes the most sense. Because again, I'm saying this with all due respect, but every single one of us sitting in this room are not experts. We all have our opinions about where a school should go and all the reasons why, but nobody wants it in their backyard. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And I mean, this is probably, and one of the worst locations because of how densely populated the neighborhood is there. So I know Mike Satterwhite wanted to come up.
Thank you, Donna, for starting off with the response. I also agree that my name is Michael Satterwhite with the Lynn School Committee, that we do need to work together. I was highly disappointed in the vote that was taken by the council to table the transfer of funds for the air quality and ventilation that needs to be done on our schools. As a parent, you know, my child's going to be going back to these schools, so I want to make sure that the air quality and the suggestions of the CDC are at least followed. So that was not ideal, especially after hearing what Mike said about the need to make sure that the current buildings that are in use are in good condition to do what they need to do. You know, it just goes against completely what he said. I do want to again work together on some sort of plan. We are at a lack of land in the city, and if you look or gather data from, you know, the police or the fire department, you'll see that there are probably other calls at our other buildings as well. So if we had data to show that there was a heightened increase at this specific location as opposed to other schools or other areas within, I don't have that. That would be good to have. So you know, there's just information sharing. One of the things that we talk about in an agreement that we have with the superintendent is no surprise, and that we have the information ahead of time, so when we're discussing it, it's done in an intelligent way. So I know that you all were prepared for tonight's meeting, and that's great. I know that the city has an objective here, and it's to sell this piece of land. But again, on our side, we have needs with regards to the 17,000 students that we have to educate. We have almost 2,000 educators that need to be in buildings that are safe and that aren't overcrowded. So there's a balance that needs to be somehow met at this particular point. And I'm looking forward to getting there with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Mike Patino.
Thank you, Council President. I just heard what everybody had to say. I still don't understand what this has to do with the issue that we're discussing. You know, information in government is readily available if you ask. We all have roles. My role is to advise on financial matters. I don't see how we can move forward if we can't get past whether we simply have to surplus a building so we can take this liability off our books. I grew up in the second most densely populated city in the Commonwealth, and we found a spot to build 3 new schools. So all of our schools are less than 20 years old. It can be done, but we can't wait around bleeding money, having a liability on our books if we can't simply make this one decision. It's one decision that hopefully brought us all together to make another 5 or 10 positive decisions to build a school. Lynn is 15 square miles, 8 square miles of, 7 square miles of forest, but there's still 8 miles left. If we hire somebody or work hard enough, we can do that. But it still doesn't make sense to hold a liability on our books that can cause death and harm to somebody. It's never going to be a school. I heard that from everybody tonight. We need to move on from this, and sometimes moving on means make one decision at a time. The council, the school committee should get together and demand meetings together quarterly until we can get something done. But I don't see that happening when we can't make one decision to surplus a building that hasn't been used in 5 years, that's a blight on the neighborhood, and that's a detriment to public safety and anybody even walking by. I'm trying to figure out where we're coming from, but again, if we're persistent, we'll find a way, we'll find a home to build something. But I can't see us getting past declaring this building surplus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Jared.
Jared Dickelson, Lynn School Committee. Thank you, President Sear, for calling this meeting. Really appreciate getting everybody together. It's super important that we are all working on the same team. We come from different bodies, but we all know that we're all here to do what's best for Lynn. I also would like to thank all of the city officials that spoke and shared their perspective about the importance of this issue, and I think we totally agree. And would thank my colleagues, Ms. Coppola and Attorney Satterwhite, for sharing their thoughts about the importance of thinking about the issues that we have in the schools and the space. And I know, Councilor Sear, that you really understand those issues. In terms of where we are now, just talking what Mr. Bertino just mentioned, the Lynn School Committee has shown over the years that we are absolutely ready to move forward. The city had asked, that came to the school department and asked to do an RFP, and the school committee was absolutely ready to go forward with that. The city asked for more time to finish the RFP, and the school committee was absolutely there, right there with you to give the city more time. The city then asked to tear the building down because the RFP didn't come back with what we wanted, despite the predictions about a certain price we would get. And we understand that there's certain things you can't predict, and the school committee was absolutely ready to tear that building down and voted for it to be torn down. And also understand that the cost of the teardown turned out to be much higher than we all thought. It's unfortunate, obviously, that we didn't have that information beforehand when we did the budget for the project. But we're now in this position. What I'm still trying to understand, which is I'm genuinely glad we're having this conversation, because I think that's how you iron out these sort of uncertainties. But why can't we just go through that process again? Mr. Bertino mentioned declaring the property surplus as a prerequisite for getting rid of the liability, but that's not really the case. You can get rid of the liability without declaring the property surplus by doing what we did previously in the RFP. If the city has an idea, and it sounds like the city has an idea, right? The city is already talking to investors about what the property could do, then we could develop an RFP that meets that parameter and do what we did last time. And then on the off chance that what the city is hoping happens there falls through, like it did the previous time, and then we can have another conversation. Maybe by then we'll have had that plan, we'll have had that citywide plan that you mentioned, Councilor Sear, which I think is a great idea about looking throughout the city for the right land that we need for schools, and we'll be able to see how that lot would fit into that plan. And in the meantime, we've absolutely taken the imperative action that Inspector Donovan, Chief Archer, Chief Desmarais has implored us to do today, because if the goal is urgency to make a change there, then the quickest path forward is to restart that process that we had done. And I can't speak for my colleagues on the committee, but based on what we had done last time, there was certainly a willingness to do that. And if that's coupled with the steps that we've talked about tonight, about working together to find the suitable replacement space that Ms. Coppola mentioned, then I think we could really find a way forward there. So again, Councilor Sear, appreciate you calling the meeting. Councilors, appreciate everyone's thought and attention to this. I know that we all understand not just the importance of protecting that neighborhood for the public safety personnel that are responsible for keeping it safe, but also the plight that our schools are in, and the work that we all are going to have to do together to remedy that for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I just want to touch on something that Jared said, urgency. So the process to put the RFP together, get it out there, get the responses, we're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 months for that to happen. Once that happens and somebody replies back, and I know there's a couple different developers out there that are very interested in this property, they're looking at a minimum of another year on top of that to put together, as I stated earlier, that they're looking for a tax incentive for that property to declare it a historic site, to also put vouchers together for the people that are going to be living there. But the big thing is that we feel as though if we're able to put an RFP together, get that out there, and in 7 months, we have someone that we accept, they take control of the building. They become responsible for it. They have to maintain it. They have to put security there. And those are all stipulations that we would put in the RFP. And of course, we want the school committee to work with us and help us on that. The main reason that we weren't able to accept the RFPs the last time was because of some of the stipulations that were in there. So we really have to sit down with our law department and really put that together with public properties. Anybody else? Mr. Mayor? Believe it or not, I'm deaf, but when you come there, I can hear.
What was in the last RFP that was a problem for you?
That they had to take the building over within 6 months.
But you're
Fine,
saying
that
you
they would-
know of people that are in a hurry. So what would
The hurry is the amount of time that it takes. So when in the RFP, it said that they had to secure the funds, come back and pay for the property within 6 months. Am I right, Councilor Lamanna? Attorney Lamanna? Closing had to be within 60 days. That's what the problem was.
There was a stipulation on the first RFP that $4 million would be the minimum purchase price that would go back to the school department. Now that it's a public knowledge, it's not $3 million and knock it down, the structure down, it's closer to between 4 and 6 now. That's not really a realistic purchase price that we would consider. So that stipulation, I think, has changed in the past 2 years. But there was a 60-day turnover for a closing in the last RFP that no bidder could comply with.
John? Pardon? Did we come? Jim? Was there an amended RFP that came back?
There have been 2 RFPs on the site.
And what happened with the second one?
Everything was rejected on the second RFP because they needed approximately 2 years to get the financing to pay the bid, which was $4 million, is my understanding. But the closing could not happen for the earliest 2 years.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I think you can use the mic right there.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the members of the school committee who I get to serve with for the passion and commitment to the students in the community. I laid out my position at the last meeting, and I think we're looking at 2 distinct directions here. I believe that we need to move forward and pass on the property to the city and allow the city to move forward and make a decision on what's appropriate for that location. I know there's a difference of opinion on the committee, and I respect that. I think additionally there's a second direction that I think continues to be laid out tonight, and I think we all feel that way. I don't know that it had to be articulated tonight, but that we all are trying to work together to build a new school or new schools and have a plan moving forward. And that will involve both the school committee and the council and my office to try and create that direction forward. I think we continue to come together and talk about this location that I'll speak for myself, that I don't believe is appropriate for a school, a school would not be built there because of the density of schools in that location, in that neighborhood. Again, I've made this position clear at the last school committee meeting as we had those discussions, as well as before that. So I think it's time, from my perspective, that we move forward on that and we focus clearly on the investment that needs to be made related to the circulation in the buildings that are just about ready to move forward. We've agreed to a $6 million investment on 10 buildings to allow those ventilation systems to be improved on. We're ready to move forward related to building a new Pickering. We're ready to put dollars on the table to create that study. There's been studies done in the past that have gone, when the Pickering proposal that was voted down happened, there was a major study through the MSBA to look at all locations of potential site locations for schools in the community, recognizing that we are definitely challenged to find those locations and make it work in our community because of the lack of space. But there were proposals that, during that study, that recommended some locations that could be revisited. I think it's a good idea that a couple of school committee members as well as a couple of counselors come together, and I would suggest in conjunction with the MSBA process to really review how we can move forward, and not only to build a new Pickering, which is the first piece of the puzzle, but to really have a broader discussion about how we create an ongoing capital plan to create the schools that we need in this community. There's legislation that's being filed by Senator Creighton to take a different view of the MSBA, to take a look at how communities like Lynn can have different criteria and be allowed with different criteria to either rebuild on locations that wouldn't be appropriate under current MSBA proposals. I think we need to be very involved in moving that legislation forward so we can, communities like New Bedford and Lawrence and Lynn, who have no land but have the real need for building new schools, can have a real voice at the table to look outside the box on how we build or repurpose other locations that are either ready to come down or are really in need of a new building. So I do think that there's common ground here, and I do think that we're talking about two specific pieces of a puzzle that we need to find a way forward on. And like I said before, I really believe that we need to move this property off the rolls of the schools and focus clearly on our investments we need to make together, both bodies, but more importantly as a community, to find a way to both build a new school initially, and I think Mike Bertino has said it in the past, to prove to the community that we can do that in a way that reflects the values that we have in this community, and I think just as importantly create a plan, a capital plan that moves forward to establish not only one new school, but what do we need to do to create the kind of schools and opportunities for the students in the community that the investment that we need to make together is something that we will make together. So again, I enjoy and respect the work I do every day with the impassioned and committed members of the school committee, and I know there's a disagreement, at least from my perspective, in terms of some of the discussion that's going on tonight, but we have consistently been willing to move forward and give up 6 months at a time. I think it's time to move on from that property based on all the information we received tonight, but more importantly on creating the right vision that we can work together on, move past that site and really focus clearly on the kind of investments we need to make related to one new school, the investment in the ventilation in those 10 schools, which is, and I talked to Mike Donovan today, which we're a couple of weeks away from that work beginning. It's my understanding, Mike. And then what do we do in terms of creating a real capital plan with the CFO that allows us to not only build one school, but to have an actual plan, identify locations where we can either expand on schools, rebuild schools in those locations. I know Fectolieri and Cobbett are locations that those schools are really in tough shape. So what is the right plan that we can find together to create the right plan for all of us? And again, I do agree that we need to move forward off the Marshall site and then focus more clearly on creating the kind of schools that the students in this community expect, and we as elected officials, I know, are committed to making happen. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else wishing to speak? Come on, no one from the school committee? You guys usually have like a 4-hour meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made. All those in favor? I want to say thank you to school committee members coming, both chiefs for coming tonight, to the mayor. I think this was a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.